Okay, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Don Bowman. My company is Agilicus, and I'm here today to talk about AI and its threats to industrial control systems, specifically for small manufacturing. And it's got a lot of threats, it's got a lot of environments, but we're going to focus on that one today. So first, I thought I'd start with the obligatory AI-generated image. Here's a Old West stagecoach being held up by artificial intelligence with a gun on a tablet at the corner of Progress Gulch and Automation Avenue. You can all laugh to yourself with this. First, I thought I'd start with some cold, hard facts. So this is from CISA's Risk and Vulnerability Assessment for 2024. And it's specifically, these are things that happened, not what might happen, but things that did happen. So these are the risks that materialized and made, good days bad for good people. And if you look at that, look at the numbers here. So 42% of actual attacks used valid accounts. Valid accounts. So that means they either guessed a password or there was an account that they were able to get control of by some sort of phishing, or maybe they had, passed the hash credentials or something like that. 26% use spear phishing, which is account adjacent. So it's still identity, but they've tricked you somehow. 10% use brute force on passwords. So if you look at that and you add that up, almost 80% of attacks use the user authentication and identity weaknesses to get into industrial control system, critical infrastructure environments. We're going to come back to this in a second because we're going to see what AI does for this. It's not going to make it better, is my foreshadowing. So first, big scary AI. AI is today's boogeyman. It's the good, the bad, the ugly. It's the back in my day, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody talks about it because it's the main subject of conversation. And what does it do for attackers? Well, attackers are lazy people. AI magnifies everything. It magnifies good, the bad, the ugly. It's magnifying. So AI is the faithful servant of the attackers who are lazy. So if I'm an evil person, but I don't want to get off my couch, well, I don't want to even get anything done. If I'm an evil person, but I won't get off my couch, but I've got an AI to instruct, I get stuff done, and that might not be good. Attackers are also dumb. They're not all dumb. I mean, attackers can be smart people, but let's face it, they would be doing something else if they could. AI is their crutch, rendering the dumb smart enough to get done. So what that means is the bar of worth the effort to do something bad has just gone down. So a lazy person without a lot of knowledge is going to be able to do a lot more damage with AI. And one thing to remember, a lot of people think about AI as just a large language model and a chat bot, a search somewhere. And it's actually a lot more than that. And when we're talking about attackers here, AI enhances the number of their activities. So the first one is pattern space reduction. Going back to that first slide and brute force password detecting, how do you speed that up? Well, you could try every possible combination, AAA, AAB, AAC, but if you know something about whose password it is and what site they're on, you can guess. Well, let's try SCADA 2025, let's try SCADA 2024, maybe put the site name in there. And, if I'm a hard-working attacker, I would have typed those all out just like they show in the movies. Well, let me try, it's AES 256, RSA, let me just type it in faster. That doesn't really work. But here, the AI can generate a predictive list that is more likely to succeed for the phishing or for the brute force, and that could be bad for you. The second is it simplifies integration. So imagine that you have a SCADA historian on your site and your team has been experimenting with model context protocol, or MCP, because it makes it easier to get the data in and out of it. You don't have to know some arcane search language. Well, the AI is doing that for you, and it means that there's what's called prompt injection attacks and other things we can get in there. And the next one is search space reduction as well. So if I can see A and B but not C, then it helps me to get through there. And the lateral option. So the AI can do a lot of stuff for you when you're talking as an attacker. But the main thing is we're transitioning in our use of AI from I ask, it answers. This was what ChatGPT made common is people cheating on exams and, asking dumb questions and getting dumb answers. But now it's I ask, it does. So it used to be that it would just tell you, here's the answer, and you got to go figure out how to do it. And now it's like, here, I just did that for you. And the example everybody uses, book a vacation for me, book a hotel room or something. But obviously, if you can do that, you can do other things. Log into a system, do something bad with it there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yesterday's botnet has become the command and control channel, is now moving to the agentic world. So that's what we used to talk about, is there's this thing called a C2, command and control, botnets, yada, yada, yada. Today, it's all about agents. You've got an agent, the agent will go and do work on your behalf when you're not sitting at the keyboard. So you've moved from, I'm sitting in front of the keyboard and typing, to it's just doing it for me. And that is about scale. So now you're going back to your lazy attackers, become more effective at higher scale, and it's a bad thing. So what are the simple needs? Well, these are the needs we have in the world. We've got something on site. We've got certain people that need to do certain things to it, but not other things, et cetera. And AI hasn't really changed that. And there's this battleground for identity. On the first slide I talked about, I said, well, nearly 80% of the successful attacks last year used something that was related to identity. And there's this battleground when you have a manufacturing environment. You've got people that might work for you as contractors, or they don't work full time, or you might have two companies that work together in some sort of joint venture, maybe contract manufacturing. You might have somebody that supports your environment, maybe an MSP that supports your SAP system. You might have, et cetera, a system integrator that's helping you out by keeping your HMI up to date. And each of those people work for different companies. And in the past, what we did is we created new accounts, shared accounts often. We would create the XYZ company account. Everybody had the password to it. And this is going to make it a lot easier for AI to attack you, but it makes it easier for everybody to attack you. And this becomes a battleground, is, how do I sign into stuff? And you start to get shadow IT tools like TeamViewer being used with shadow accounts, and convenience goes up, but security goes down. So there's this problem that I call the shared custody, shared destiny. This is really the solution to that, is to recognize you all have a legitimate reason to be doing something, and you are inherently trustworthy people. I know it's ironic. We're a company that makes zero trust for a living, but there is a certain amount of trust. I've got a contract with company A, and we've agreed that they're allowed to do this, and et cetera. And then they in turn have an employment contract with person C. So therefore, by extension, person C is able to do something on my site. If we use this model, this Venn diagram in the lower right, and we recognize that that means I should trust company B to attest that person C is who they say they are, instead of creating a new shared account. So the operator, you're the manufacturer, you own the equipment. You tend to view this problem as vendor access management. I got many vendors. Flip the chair around and look at how they view it. They view it as, oh my God, yet another VPN with yet another identity for yet another client. Why are all my customers different? I'm having to write all these passwords down. I just hope they never do multi-factor authentication because I won't be able to share it. But this is actually a shared problem. You get a shared outcome, a shared problem, and there's an easy solution to it. We call it zero trust. And zero trust helps you every bit as much in the AI world as it did in the pre-AI world. There's three parts of zero trust. And everybody says, oh my God, this is so complicated. There's all these NIST documents, and I see all this conflicting stuff online. I'm here to tell you it's way simpler than you think. This is not something you need to overthink. Zero trust is 3 swim lanes, 3 independent activities you need to do. The first is what I call the who problem. Who are you? If you know who down to the level of an individual person, and there's no ambiguity, they might be person A or B, no shared accounts, but it's to an individual person, you've got the first thing solved. We call that identity. The second is what? What are you allowed to do? What is this person able to do? Dawn is allowed read-only access to HMI 2. That's a what. We call this authorization. This is what you're allowed to do on the network. And then the third is access. How? How do I get you there? So the who, the what, the how. If you have this solved on a per person, per resource basis with fine-grained, it's not just everything or nothing, you have zero trust. And that's exactly what you want from an insurance standpoint, from a risk standpoint, from explaining it to your board standpoint, from a not having downtime because something bad happened to your network standpoint. This is what you want. So Why does this matter in manufacturing, and why did I bring AI up here? Well, all of your vendors right now, I guarantee it, are trying to figure out a way to charge you more and put a feature called AI on, at the same time actually have less hours spent. So they're trying to double dip. They're going to increase the top line and increase the bottom line. And we're going to do it under the rubric of managed remote operations. And there's nothing wrong. Managed remote operations is something you should want. So somebody else doing predictive maintenance for you, they're keeping it online. There's a service level agreement. They're keeping you up. It's all good. I mean, they're there when you're not. So 24/7 operation. They've got the alarming and so on. The systems are getting more and more complicated, as you know. So that HMI that's on your network today is not the HMI that was there 25 years ago. Well, it might still be actually physically, I suppose, but the new one you buy today is what I mean. You buy a new HMI today, and there's actually a complete engineering domain for how to set those up. It's got a big user interface with a lot of complexity in it. It looks a lot more like a modern website than the old one, which is just a red light, green light with a on-off type of thing. The second is the numbers of programmable logic controllers with the amount of logic in each is getting more and more complicated, and the number of sensors is going up. And there's lots of reasons for this. You want to reduce your scrap rate, you want to increase your throughput, you want to reduce, et cetera, et cetera. You're improving your process. And what does that mean? More automation, more control, and smarter control. And those systems are getting more and more interconnected. We're starting to see things that have off-net licensed servers. Well, the manufacturer wants to make sure you're not stealing from them, so they want a licensed server. They don't want to put it on a site anymore with a little hardware dongle, put it on the internet. So suddenly you're needing to have network connectivity into this zone that's full of a bunch of things that nobody's really sure. Actually, we're really sure how secure they are. And the answer is not at all. But people are also starting to talk about off-net databases and historians and things that are actually maybe very close to part of the process. And efficiency is becoming a big driver. So here, managed remote operations is about getting the right expert to the right piece of equipment as quickly as possible when something goes wrong. The other thing that's happening here, and this is adjacent to AI, is what I call the SaaSification. So it used to be you bought something and you owned it, and now you rent it and it's delivered over the internet. So the first big thing we saw that went that way was music. When I started at university, there was a store that sold music, and you went into HMV, it was called, and you went in there and you browsed through a bunch of CDs, and some of them you were allowed to listen to and some you couldn't, and you bought them. Today, you can't do that anymore. Well, maybe you can, but I don't know where you would go for it. But today, your music is streamed to you. So whatever service you use, I use YouTube Music, but it doesn't really matter. I don't own the CDs anymore. And we got over that, I suppose, after some grousing about it. But there's also what I call the John Deere business model. When I was a kid on our farm, the tractor didn't really have any electrical system in it. It had lights, and you could start it with a screwdriver, and that was it. That was the electrical system on it, a mechanical fuel pump and everything else. Today, John Deere won't sell you a tractor unless they have 5G connectivity to it, and you're not allowed to repair it. Look up right to repair. John Deere has gone to war with the farmer on this issue. And it's because they want to make tractor as a service. They want to make money on the tractor after they sold it. And that's because some of the people are still driving tractors that look like that one on the right, because they were designed to last forever. And John Deere's like, hey, wait a minute, how do we get more money? The side effect of this is we're seeing more and more things in the industrial control system going down the same path. You're seeing smaller grain licensing. So, you've got a box that can do X, but you haven't bought the license to it. You're starting to see things that have online license managers, starting to use things that are the control system in cloud. And that comes back to AI as well. In small manufacturing, everybody wants to get the benefits of big data. They want to get the benefits of better automation. So it used to be automation was you hired a person to stand there and press the button when this happened. And then it was very simple limit switches and stuff. And then it was very simple computers. And then it became PLCs, which were actually purpose built. And then it became sort of general purpose PLCs. And now we're moving into a stage where maybe it's just the sensors going straight into AI and it makes the decision. So that's another area that you're going to see cybersecurity attacks coming in, but it's also the siren song of progress. You're going to want it interconnected to your environment, and you're going to whipsaw back and forth between those. My competitors are getting more products out per hour, and how do I compete with them, and et cetera. So we need more stuff. We need big data. Well, we can't do it on site because the edge computing, there's too many GPUs, and they're all going into some cloud somewhere. So we're just going to rent it. Okay, great. So now we need full connectivity there. Now you're going to need dual WAN because you want to make sure your network doesn't go down. So you can have maybe Starlink plus fiber or something like that. And oh my God, now the remote operations part, I don't know how to make that work, etc. I'm here to tell you, we will solve all these problems for you. Just call me, say, hey, Don, I got this problem. We'll fix it for you. Big data is the other one. Big data and AI are somewhat interrelated. AI is a huge consumer of data. They trained it on, trillions and trillions of data points, stolen books, to be clear. There's a big copyright case on that, but that's what they trained it on. And when you talk about your networks, you're actually creating a lot of data right now. And that data comes from your sensors. So it's financial data, units in, unit out, amount of inventory, hours on, hours off, orders, but it's also sensors. And you start seeing some things like one of our customers, they make transmissions, and there's welding transmissions. There's a lot of safety things associated with how deep is the weld, and you're starting to get a lot of data points there. You see it also in the energy industry. You get this sort of three-dimensional model of the ground, and you start to get these very, very fine-grained everything, and there's a lot of data there. AI is what's helping people to view that data. Big data for the long time, the problem has been there's not really been a lot of aggregation. So something would produce 100,000 data points, and it would put it into a spreadsheet with 100,000 data points, and it would hand it to the users and say, there you go. And you would look at it and go, I don't really see what I'm supposed to see here. Can you zoom back out a little bit? And they're like, well, I don't know, it's the smallest we can zoom. So AI is sort of helping people to analyze this data, look for trends, look for outliers. So now this is another reason that your plant's going to be interconnected, because you're not bringing this on site. The licenses aren't there, the storage isn't there, the cost model. So you're suddenly going to have full-time, real-time internet connectivity to everything, including that ancient PLC that you just know shouldn't be out there. And a whole bunch of users supporting you that you've got a shared account on or using TeamViewer or VPN for. So I suggested a way to reduce this risk with zero trust. And it absolutely is. It's part of a greater strategy called defense in depth. Defense in depth, what's that all about? It's basically the idea that you don't put all of your eggs in one basket. You don't think, okay, I bought one firewall so I can sit back and ignore everything else. No, you still need an antivirus. You still need to train your users on phishing. You still need to have multi-factor authentication. Those are all different tools. Defense in depth means that you have a fallback position when the attacker gets through level A, there's a level B. And I said when, not if. And the second is defense in depth gives you telemetry so you can see when the attacker is moving, so you can get to them before something bad happens. And the third thing is it slows them down. So defense in depth in medieval times, there was a moat, there was a wall, there was a keep, there was a field, etc. So you could see them coming, and then they had to get through the moat, and then they had to get over the wall, and the king was on the way back into the keep. And so that gave you time to react, and it slowed them down at each step. Defense in depth is the same thing. And zero trust is part of a defense in depth strategy. And it's a great strategy for that inbound and that outbound data path that we just talked about for small manufacturing, so that your AI and your big data and that system integrator all can coexist peacefully in that shared custody, shared destiny, identity world. Why does this reduce your risk? Back to that first slide, 80% of the successful attacks in 2024 related in some way, shape, or form to identity. We've gotten rid of all these private shared identities and this and that. We've made a single sign-on with their proper upstream identity provider. That means if a person leaves a company that supports you, they will take them out of the system. You won't have to be notified 6 months later that they left on bad terms. Their HR churn is not your risk. Second is overbroad access gone, that authorization layer, that what you're allowed to do. We've gotten rid of this problem of the idea of it's just a VPN or just connected. You've got access to everything. Well, everything is the wrong term. Blast radius. You want to minimize what happens when that thing gets breached. Defense in depth. So if I say Don has read-only access to HMI2, and somebody walks up to me and says, I'll give you $25 for your password. Well, that's what you've lost, is read-only access to HMI2. I didn't have access to anything else, as opposed to a TeamViewer, Jumpbox, or a VPN. I would have had everything, even though I wasn't supposed to use it. An audit trail. Reagan once said, trust but verify. He was talking about a bunch of Russians and a bunch of missiles. We absolutely trust that they will get rid of the missiles under the treaty, and we're going to verify that happens. If you have a perfect audit trail, so if you have no audit trail, I don't know, they connect to my network, I don't know what happens. Perfect audit trail is the user was Don, the location was this, they did that. That is a strong way to build trust, because you know, and they know, that they'll get caught if they do something they're not supposed to. But it's also a good way for that defense in depth to see things coming. Enforcing multi-factor authentication. absolutely you want to enforce multi-factor authentication. We make it easy to do. I know you've got a lot of equipment in that small manufacturing plant that's got no first factor, let alone a second factor. You know, you and I both know it. You got a PLC, it's labeled Rockwell in the front, it speaks Ethernet IP, and that's just a simple TCP protocol. But with a product like ours, we are an identity-aware proxy. We could make it so you can do multi-factor authentication on behalf of something that is really not prepared to participate, and get that checkbox for insurance, and get that checkbox for compliance, but more importantly, actually improve your security, actually improve your controls. Removing the VPN means only the resource and its network protocol are accessible. It means that even if I have malware floating around my PC because of that USB flash drive I picked up in the parking lot after the rave I was at on Friday night, well, it still can't get into your network. Our system, only the application is allowed to, and the user is allowed to drive it can. Malware might wreck the PC, but it's not getting into your network. And getting rid of shared software and licenses, you know, whether it's AI or it's big data or it's just people installing stuff, it's a hassle and nobody wants it. Reduces your risk. So back to that first slide when I talked about the risk and analysis there. Look at the numbers: 42% plus 26% plus 80%, or plus 10%. It's like 80%, right? You know, the majority of the attacks that occurred here occurred with things that were identity related. If you have a singular account per person, and it's a valid account through their identity provider, it's not a shared password situation, with a proper first and second factor, with a valid user heuristic, maybe GUIP or some other lockout, this risk is dramatically reduced. Dramatically reduced. I wouldn't say zero. Zero is a strong word when we talk about risk, but everything has a risk to it. You know, you take a risk going to work every morning, but you do that. It's because a lot of controls that have reduced that risk. They've got stoplights and seat belts and airbags and stuff. So you accept that risk. You know, you wouldn't do it if that risk wasn't controlled, and you wouldn't do it if that risk was outrageous. Same thing here. Once you've dramatically reduced that risk, you move on to the next one. The spear phishing link. You know, attackers have loved this for years. I send you an email with something enticing in it. Hey, it's Don. I work for your MSP. We're introducing a new multi-factor system. We just need you to set it up. Here's the link to get set up. Well, I can tell you what's happening there. They're harvesting your username and password and setting up multi-factor, but it's not one you have. And then they turn around and use that right away. So if you have single sign, if everybody signs in just like the sign of their email, you can't have this actor in the middle thing tricking people into a fake login screen. So even the people that click on the link because they shouldn't, they can't do it. It doesn't work. And if you do multi-factor via passkeys, which is how I would propose you do it, it means that you can't be tricked to provide it. It's no code to type in. If you're using SMS for multi-factor, you have a problem. You should not be doing that. You should not be doing that in 2025. They're not secure. If you're using passkey, you're pretty good. And then the third one is brute force. Well, if there are no passwords, there's no passwords to guess. So, you know, we win. So here's my call to action. So we talked today about AI. Model context protocol integrated to your historian is going to increase your risk. Your team is going to be using it in a shadow IT mode, whether you like it or you hate it. Your vendors are integrating it into the product. Your vendors are using it to manage the service for you. Everything you're going to do in the future is going to be using it because that's how the world works to get more efficient. So like it, love it, hate it, it doesn't really matter. You're not in control of the decision. AI is coming. AI is a magnifier. It makes good things better and it makes bad things worse. So it just polarizes. So what are you going to see? Attackers are going to be more successful, more quickly attacking people. You want to not be on the list of people who got attacked? You deploy zero trust. You make sure your identity system's solved. Boom, 80% of your risks reduced. Defense in depth, the moat, the castle, the keep, the drawbridge, the turrets, the boiling oil, all this stuff. You want to be able to see them coming and slow them down and make it so they have to show you who they are. So critical infrastructure's got multiple user types, that integrator, remote operations, joint venture, contract manufacturer, et cetera. And you got a lot of unpatched systems. Like you and I both know that, right? That system that's running around in there that's older than you are, that everybody's afraid to touch, but is critical, you got a lot of those things. So nothing's gonna change. Those aren't gonna magically go away because the thing beside it supports AI. The other thing's still not. It's still gonna have a 5.25 floppy drive in it. AI is going to dramatically increase the reach, power, and effectiveness of an attacker. And that means that you, as a small manufacturing company, you become an economical target for them. At the end of 2023, Clorox was taken offline for about 4 months, hundreds of millions of dollars of lost production. That attacker could afford to do that because Clorox, big dollars, ransomware, yada, yada, yada. They weren't bothering with the mom and pop trailer shop that's doing a little bit of metal bending and welding. But in 2026, why wouldn't I go there? It doesn't cost me anymore. I pay a few dollars in the AI engine and I just attack the universe. I'm going to get lucky. I'm betting on more numbers on the roulette wheel for the same bet cost. Why wouldn't I do that? So you are going to become an increasing target, and you are going to have less defenses than Jaguar Land Rover, who got taken this year. They're going to invest heavily. You need to invest. The thing I'm talking about here, Zero Trust, you can get that going in the time it took us to do this webinar. You could have deployed our product, and you would have deployed it for not a lot of money, nowhere close to what those folks are paying. And you would have dramatically reduced your risk. It doesn't mean it's the only thing you should do. It depends in depth. You should do a lot of things, but this is something you can get done today. Give us a call. So with that, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. My team's going to reach out to you after the webinar. And again, my name is Don Bowman. My company is Agilicus. Our product is Agilicus AnyX. And we make Zero Trust easy and simple for critical infrastructure, including small manufacturing. Cheers. Bye-bye.